Hey guys, Raymundo here with another video. The Great American Hijacking. I'm going to try and cover the series of events that have occurred in our nation's history to get us to this just um, bar, bizarre situation, and it is really nothing short of a hijacking. Okay, this is brought to you by aguadiero.net. If you visit this website, you'll find a lot of other videos related to this, and you'll find a lot of information about how to create your own private express trust, and a lot of videos about why to have a private express trust. This being one of them. Okay, there's this is part of a kind of a grand series that I've tried to encompass. All the major issues I think one really needs to know. The first one was how to protect yourself from the United States, and then I did one on American Admiralty, which talks specifically about real commerce and how that is ensnared, and they're all available on Rumble, and this is the one we're covering right now. So the table of contents for this, we're going to talk about early America, how slavery and the practice of it affected what's going on now, the Civil War, what happened after the Civil War, the Reconstruction, and 1933, an important year when our money went off the gold back, and finally usurpation. We'll talk about the real reality, I guess, of what's going on. So to get things started, early America, the most important thing, I think, or what you need to get out of this video is that there was a lot of Federalist and anti-Federalist energy, okay? Federalists, wanted a single government to kind of run and rule over all the land, where the anti-Federalists, wanted to have states, and that's where states' rights came from, and having a state be the sovereign power, and not, be subject to some leader far, far away. And here's a little map of where it was. Actually, I don't have the year, but I think it was actually around the time that the nation was created. But you can see that there was a lot of people that wanted a federalist government, and they're in the green, and then the yellow was a strong anti-federalist, and the purple just wasn't really organized yet. So these energies and the history of these can be researched and read on your own if you want. The anti-federalist papers and the federalist papers. They're just basically short essays talking about the values of both, why one is better than the other, why you need this. The Federalists, I've read several of their essays, talk about the importance of having one large federal government. Okay, but it's really important to know that our nation, the way it functions now, is not anything like it was back then. The idea of a federalist or an anti-federalist is pretty much gone because everything already is a federalist government. The anti-federalist energy is pretty much kaput, which is kind of the nature of this video. So, but it is important to know that there's always have this power of our nation, especially in the beginning. There was people, of all levels, of all powers, that wanted states' rights and the states to just govern themselves with, federal protection. And there was other groups that wanted one federal power. So once the nation was created, and the nation is a trust, it's slavery was a clearly an influential or paramount part of creating the nation. The labor slavery was what allowed America to prosper. Slaves worked the lands and turned, the agriculture and the vast resources of this untapped America got cultivated and usable by predominantly slave labor. And slavery was a part of our history ever since 1609, when the first capitalists and privateers established a stakehold here. It was just 10 years later they were already putting slaves to work. And this little graphic here shows kind of the migration of how slavery started up here in the Chesapeake Bay, in the tobacco farms, and in the early times, it was all up in the Northeast. But then as states started to grow or add states to the Union into the South, slavery became a bigger deal, and in the southern states, it became implemented even more. And that, adding states the way America could really jump started slavery. But at the same time, the availability of slavery, the fact that slaves were easily to come by, worked hand in hand with this kind of southern growth of plantations and profit. Okay. Okay, and as states were added, slavery before the Civil War, there were slave states and non-slave states, and so when a non-slave state was added, a slave state was added, or slavery was allowed. See, in the North, they didn't permit slavery in certain states, and in the South, it was obviously a big part of it, and it was a bigger part of it than what most of us really think. We're all very aware of labor slavery. And of just the unpaid work of turning lands, picking cotton, doing agriculture for not getting any pay, or not treated like an equal or like a human, had its value. But there was even more value than that. For the land to be economically valuable, for land to be useful, when they acquired land, they needed the labor to get the value out of it, to grow the crops and whatnot. So the bankers were not only successful in turning heavily wooded lands into agricultural gold. By 1840, the banks and the southern state legislatures developed a scheme to use slaves as security for currency. All right? This is the big deal. This is the big part that we were never really talked about. We only talked about the labor slavery. At the time, gold and silver were the only security used for currency, and sophisticated profiteers were savvy at hoarding gold for themselves, stifling the money supply and the economy. Okay, you got to see, it wasn't necessarily the economy that was struggling. It was the bankers. It was the wealthy folks hoarding the gold. All right. Now, by replacing gold with living people, it jump-started the southern economy to the point where Warren County, Mississippi, where Vicksburg, Mississippi was considered the wealthiest place on earth. And how did they do it? So a slave could be financed, all right? You could go to a slave, if you had land and you had work that needed to be done, you can go to a slave market and not bring any cash. You could finance it to where the slave would work off their own debt in the next 12 to 18 months. Which means if you had a slave as well that was not financed and was paid off, anytime you needed cash, you could finance. You can mortgage your slaves, your collateral, and just create money. And so the slavery became the wealth, not the agriculture. And if you look at the history, you look at the productivity of the South, it wasn't that productive. For having free labor, the amount of work they got wasn't as amazing as you would expect for how wealthy they were. It was because simply owning a human being was money. And you could get them for free if you were a landowner in the South. So, it was not only the labor that they could do, and it was not only the goods that they could produce from their labor, cotton, wheat, soy, whatever other agricultural products. It was also just them being on the land provided all the wealth they needed to do anything they wanted. And that was the power of the South. Okay, that was what the South was doing. The North was poor. It was still getting screwed by trade with England and having England basically rob us of our minerals. Okay. Yeah, I think I covered all that. So it's again to understand that the energy of the slavery in America, it was the landowners that were going and getting the slaves, but you got to remember the bankers were the ones pushing it. Okay, the bankers were the ones that were investing in these capitalists and these profiteers to come to America and create money and get wealth. Okay, so they were the ones supporting the entire slave trade. They were the one making it easy for people to move to America and start buying up land and keep the slave trade going, because that's what was creating the money. It wasn't really the production. But the important part here is to really make sure you understand that it was not just about labor slavery. They securitized people for the backing of currency in the South. Securitization of humans worked so well, the only inhibitor to the scheme was controlling the ratio of slaves to free people. You see, the more slaves, the more money. Simply keeping the slaves obedient, docile on the land was the priority. The only way for the banker scheme to continue to prosper was to expand its scope. Okay, this scheme was real, and it was so powerful that it couldn't be stopped. It couldn't be slowed down, and it was going to become obvious to everybody what they were doing. They had to develop a scheme to get everybody to be securitized. Okay, in comes the Civil War. Now, a lot can be said about the Civil War, and you can see right here it says sovereign nation versus sovereign nations. If you read the Treaty of Paris, it's quite evident and obvious that all the states were sovereign. We are all individual nations. It was a group of nations succeeding from another group of nations. It was nations fighting other nations. It was not these subservient states that were underneath the United States having a little tiff, all right? And in fact, the United States had no constitutional jurisdiction to invade and occupy the sovereign states, the southern states or the northern states. It's not constitutionally permitted. A lot would say that there was a martial law that was instituted that gave them that authority. A lot of people say that hasn't ever ended either. So, and the thing about, the Civil War, now that you know about what was really going on with slavery, it's always been fascinating to think about the Civil War, that all these white people started fighting and killing each other for the freedom of black people. Now, that does sound quite admirable and honorable, but if you think about back then, and even the time afterwards, why would they free slaves only to treat them like shit? Only to keep harassing them and bothering them and exploiting them, okay? It wasn't about the freedom of slaves. That was the false flag. It was about controlling and expanding this money system. All right, the Civil War was not about ending or freeing slavery. It was about expanding the scope of the human securitization scheme perfected by the bankers in the southern states. The chaos of the Civil War provided distraction for the United States and Washington, D.C. to declare an unconstitutional martial law and permit the federal government to invade and occupy the sovereign nation states. The Civil War ended with the surrender of the Confederate military force, with the federal United States still occupying the sovereign states. No official declaration of peace treaty or end to the martial law exists. Okay, there was an end to the battle. The military forces surrendered. Now, what happened after that is a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother war, really. The battle was only part of it. Okay, and if you look at the Revolutionary War, there was a peace treaty, the Treaty of Paris, declaring what was going to happen with these two forces after the war. That never happened in the Civil War. So when the federal government occupied the states for the defense of the Civil War, to protect the states and bring them together, after it was over, they stayed. They were still there. Which establishes the Reconstruction. So the entire United States got changed during the years after the Civil War, during the Reconstruction. All right. There was 3.5 million soldiers participated in the Civil War. 620,000 of them lost their lives. Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Columbia, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, all burned to the ground during the Civil War. And a few other things happened during the Reconstruction, too. There was the Great Chicago Fire, and I believe Boston burned down as well, all within that same time frame. And in fact, it might be kind of fascinating to look at how many fires happened throughout the nation. between 65 and 77, 1865 and 77. All right. So during the Reconstruction, it was the idea that the Civil War had decimated all these states, and they couldn't function anymore. And so the big, helpful federal government, get my hat straight. There we go. The big federal government came in and had to revamp the states, get them back to functioning. However, they punished the southern states. Okay, they couldn't just go back to the way it was. There had to be some new rules. Okay, and the southern states had to do some things in order to be allowed back into the Union, which really isn't constitutional either. All right, and so during the Reconstruction, right, you understand that 1865 is when the war officially ended. Within months of the war ending, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. They were still adding states to the northern states. Like right after, there's a couple states that were added. And they were also passing amendments. The 13th and the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment were technically written, voted on, and ratified during the Reconstruction while they were rebuilding the nation. Okay, and so you would think that these amendments were about rehabilitating the nation or creating a new thing or system so that Civil War wouldn't happen again. And the 13th Amendment goes to that. It ends slavery. But the 14th Amendment is really peculiar every way. I mean, if you read it, what's said in there is just so nuts. In fact, go read Section 2 of the 14th Amendment and tell me if you know what that means. Grammatically, like an English teacher. The way those sentences are structured, really peculiar. So, but again, so these amendments were written and passed while the southern states were still being punished, which means the southern states did not participate in the creation of these amendments in Congress, nor were they passed or ratified by the states per the Constitution. Okay, the punishment that they were doing on the southern states kept them from participating in government while they wrote these amendments, and that's a violation of the Constitution, which means those amendments are not constitutional. Okay, to help understand this, and if you go to aguadera.net and you download the zip file, there are some historical documents in there, and this file is in there, so you can read it for yourself. And so this is coming from Congress itself talking about this. This isn't just us, the people, talking about it. Congress brought these points up. Okay, and this was in 1967, June 13th. The constitutionality of the 14th Amendment was questioned on the congressional floor June 13th in 1967. And in this document, it indicates that the Reconstruction Act overthrew the existing Republican-formed governments by military force and installed de facto governments to ratify the 14th Amendment. Okay, because the 14th Amendment isn't what we think it is. And if you've watched the other videos, you know what I'm talking about. Right? These state legislatures are unconstitutional under Article 4, Section 4, which requires that all the state legislatures be of Republican form, which means they're of the people. It means the people created them. They wrote the laws. They ratified them. Some other government that's just dropped into place for temporary purposes to help function the government that's created by Congress is not of Republican form. It's not created by the people. 3/4 of the states did not ratify the 14th Amendment. And the southern states were not in Congress when the amendment was submitted for adoption in Congress. Okay? So they forced this thing through. And it was not constitutional. What is the 14th Amendment and why is it controversial? Well, there's two things. The first is the creation of the citizen of the United States and forcing all persons to be citizens of Washington, D.C. The states are sovereign and independent. Governments can't force citizenship. Persons created from law are artificial, creating the deception that everyone is a citizen of the United States in D.C. Okay, the 14th Amendment created the citizen of the United States. And even if you believe that on its face, you got to recognize that that's the federal government. Being a citizen of the United States is being a citizen of the federal government and not being you're a citizen of your own state. Even though I guess you can be a citizen of the state of such and such, that's not the same thing as being like a citizen of Colorado. Okay? but it stole our allegiance to the federal government and not the states, not the anti-federal government. And second, the states are liable for all the public debt. Whatever Congress decides to spend cannot be questioned. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment says the validity of the public debt shall not be questioned. Why does that have to do with citizens of the United States? Why is that in the same 14th Amendment? Because any person created by law is artificial, and that's exactly what this does. All persons born, from now on, any person that's being dealt with by the United States is a citizen of the United States and the state, capital state, of where they reside. So it creates this artificial thing. It creates a commercial thing, and the debts of these things cannot be questioned. That's what the 14th Amendment did, and that's why everybody didn't want to vote for it. They got forced to vote for it by the federal government during the Reconstruction, during an occupation, right? So, to recap what happened during the Constitution, the Reconstruction, the Civil War ended, the Southern forces surrendered, but all the people were still there, all these governments were still kind of there, and the South, instead of making a peace treaty, basically extorted them to change their laws and rules to join the Union again. They replaced the state governments. These anti-federalist state sovereign nation governments got replaced by a foreign thing. These governments we're dealing with now are not republic. They're not a republic form. The common law courts went away. Okay, when they replaced these governments, they took away these common law courts of equity. They took away courts where people could be heard and recognized and have our constitutional rights seen before we even walk through. They got replaced with these admiralty courts, which at first, if they're functioned in the same way, look no different. But the reality and who's who and what people are actually participating is completely different. Okay, so it replaced our governments. It took away our law, our courts. And it created this artificial person, which did nothing more than take away our attention away from being the people. Okay, so our American history through the Civil War changed our court system. All right, our court systems were now all corporate, it's all commercial. Created persons, citizens of the United States, which are in the jurisdiction of maritime, in the jurisdiction of corporate. But people, the original people, are for common law courts only. And only by our agreement should we be ever using these maritime courts. So all that happened, and then 1933 rolled around, okay? 1933, you really can't bring it up without talking about what happened in 1929, okay? Black Tuesday. It was October 29th. Huge stock market crash, okay? The roaring 20s, everybody was spending, buying, borrowing. Market was going great. Stock market started to fall. Prices went down. People got scared because they had all these investments and they started pulling their money out of the banks. And again, before 1933, the money was all backed by gold. So when you pull gold out, you pull out the liquidity. You pull out the use of 20 times the value in currency, okay? And you stifle the economy. And the metrics and the levers that were moved were all done by, high-level bankers and whatnot. But the story that was constantly told was that the people hoarding their gold was the problem, which is nuts. The people are the value. We are the nation. We are the country. There's no situation where the people having more gold is a bad thing. But that's what they convinced us of back in 1933. So stock markets crashed and it got awful for a few years. Okay, and just to highlight, this is a dollar bill pre-1933. Okay, you'll notice there's only one seal on here, and that seal, I'm not going to zoom in, but that seal is the U.S. Treasury. It does not have a Federal Reserve note seal like the money does today. Just this one seal. Okay, on March 9th, 1933. National banking holiday. Congress amended the Federal Reserve Act, declaring that notes will be used as security for the United States currency and not only replacing gold, but making it illegal to own for their persons. The theory was that metal-backed money limited the growth of the economy as there was essentially a finite amount of it. A note executed by you and me, a living soul, has no limit and solved the theoretical problem of not enough currency. What problem do we have today? Too much currency. Inflation. So, take a look at just these bills. All of a sudden they're different. All of a sudden they got two seals. All of a sudden this one has a Federal Reserve seal on it because now this money, this 1933 money, is a Federal Reserve note. What was it before? A silver certificate backed by silver. Federal Reserve note backed by something else. Yeah. So what happened in 1930 to place gold as a security to the money supply with the only thing more valuable than gold? The only thing more valuable than gold. Gold can't do anything on its own. What does it need? People. People do everything. My nose is itching. Sorry. People do all the work, buy all the things, make all the things, sell all the things, move all the things. It's the people. A note is simply a promise that you made to a certain person for a certain amount of money for a certain date. Literally, that's it. I promise to pay you this much by this date. That constitutes a note. Your promise, that energy, is the security behind all the American currency. Hard to believe. It's crazy to believe, I know. Does it sound crazy? Well, if you read the Declaration of Independence, our independence was founded on nothing more than a pledge by people like you and me. A pledge. Same thing as a promise. Read the last sentence of the Declaration of Independence. See what you've pledged to this nation already. Okay, so all the money in circulation right now is backed by you and me. It's backed by people. All right, our notes were the original security. All right, dollars are fiat. All right, they are made up. Okay, it is a derivative of the real thing. Dollar notes are drawn against real notes. You deposit a real note, they'll convert it to fake notes. Everything derived from the real thing, from equity, is fake. Okay, equity is the original deal. You, the people, are equity. Anything derived from you is not you. You might want to call it real, but in terms of the living and the not living, it's not living. It's made up. It's made up by people. Yeah, just like citizens of the United States, the money is fake, artificial. And as citizens of the U.S., you only need to know the commercial side, the fiat side, the debt side. That's the whole system is only going to talk about that. They're never going to talk about equity. And if you've watched American Admiralty, you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. The fishbowl. And, I put up this little picture just to show you what banks try to do to you, what they try to sell you in, just by giving you their note, giving them your notes. That's what you're doing. And they're selling you this crap. More ATMs, less fees. You're the one giving them the money, Don't forget that. And this is exactly why the citizen of the United States is so powerful. It is a corporation and in commerce. In the world of commerce and in maritime courts, the equitable nature of executing a note is not relevant. Only the fiat debt artificial side is known. That's right. You've written notes before, I'm sure of it. You didn't know that it was the money. They didn't tell you. Should they tell you? Are they obligated to tell you? Not if you're a person. It's that straightforward. They don't know the person's anything. Persons are slaves. You just do what they say and everything's going to be fine. You keep writing your notes, giving it to them, and then believing that they're actually giving you their own thing, which they're not. The equitable man-woman writes a note and creates the currency. That's it. The artificial citizen only knows about the fiat debt notes. And without full knowledge, people exchange their time and their labor for a perceived debt that's not real. Not knowing about equity and that they already gave real money. We already gave them the real money. We already gave the United States all of them damn money. We gave them all of our money and they still treat us like we got to keep working and own them something. What does this all mean? Well, it may be hard to believe. Right, that the people of the Constitution were tricked into being some other thing. But do you really feel like the government recognizes your inalienable constitutional rights the way we were taught? Do you think the government looks out for the people as they are contractually obligated? Or are they constantly telling the citizen what they should be doing, or what the citizen wants, and telling us what the people like and what the people don't like and what the people are okay with, and protecting the people by giving them more and more rules and more duties and more hoops to jump through? Do you have any power over the laws that are applied to you? I know you vote for somebody and they're the lawmaker, so you participate there, but we already know that they're liars, right? And if we want them to go away because they don't represent us, it takes just as much time to get them out as it does to vote them out. So it's kind of a waste of time. The Second Amendment says, shall not be infringed. However, we need permits and licenses to have firearms and bear arms. Something is not adding up, okay? Here's a little example. Court case. Let's read from the top. And yet the court can provide orders that would put my natural person in danger and remove my liberties from my constitutional rights. Further, the Fourth Amendment says that I have a right to be secure in my persons and not tricked into becoming something that I am not. The court says, well, first of all, the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply here. That's a court, because it's a government action. What the does that mean? Mr. Taz says, say that again. The Fourth Amendment doesn't apply here because why doesn't it apply? Because it is a civil action. The Constitution doesn't apply in civil actions. Civil rights are not constitutional rights. It's a derivative. It's something else. It's the rights for the persons. It's maritime. That's why he can say this. To see it again, in case you couldn't read it. First of all, the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply here. The Constitution doesn't apply in this court. This here is in Colorado Court, right downtown on Bannock Street. So, we are the people. We did create this whole thing, and somehow we've been tricked into serving it. All because we're not really paying attention. We're accepting this other thing because we don't know any better. We don't know what else is out there. Declaration of Independence, second paragraph, second sentence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We talk about consent so much, and yet we routinely just throw it away. The Supreme Court ruled that every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow man without his consent. You guys see where I'm going here? The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people, equity side, to be secure in their persons, their characters, how they show up in commerce. The government can't deal with people, so they can only deal with persons. And if you think you are the person, they tell you what to do and how to live your life. Houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Recognize any time they tell you what to do is a seizure of your liberty. So if they're trying to tell you to do something without a contract, they are messing with you. Fourth Amendment and similar state statutes provide the bridge between equity and commerce, the evidence that all commerce, all government must ensure the people's security and not allow for statutory ensnarement. And that is what we are suffering from, statutory ensnarement. We the people are the only thing that matter. We are the only value. We are the only ones to do anything. We are sovereign and our will matters. Ignoring this simple concept and allowing others to decide and trick you out of your choice is the great deception. We the people must recognize that our persons really are... We the people must recognize what our persons really are and bring suits against government and corporations who profit off this deception. Okay, we are being enslaved. All right. Creating your private express trust will give you equitable recognition and genuine protection from commercial pirates. Private Express Trust is only an equity, and so are people. But people can be confused for persons. Private Express Trust cannot be confused for anything. So, if you'd like to know more about that and how to get a grip on this huge entanglement, ensnarement, visit aguadero.net. We do Zooms. There's a lot of free information, videos like this, templates for creating your own Private Express Trust. And if you need a little assistance, we have Zooms on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and coaching is available. And if you're have the means, you can have your whole trust ordered for you and drafted. So I hope you get a lot out of it. I'm really proud of this video and the videos we put together. I think it really ties everything together, and basically is a culmination of I think the base knowledge people really need to know. If you guys get this stuff, then we can actually start taking action and start holding people accountable and start bringing things into the light. So have a great day. If you need to get a hold of me, here's my information. Find us on Telegram and Signal. Telegram is a Freedom Frequency, and Signal is the Private Express Trust. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great day.